Thank you for watching. I read a book and here's my review of it. And it's a convenient segue into a related topic, or the topic of the book. Alright, the book in question is The History of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They mean the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because I have a hard time aiming it there so you can read it. It says, written and compiled by President Joseph Smith and Apostle Heman C. Smith of the Reorganized Church. This is 794 pages long, and it is a collection of various things. It's not one solid piece of writing. The source material of that is essays, editorials, newspaper articles, letters that were written back then in the 1800s from 1876 to 1890. And the grand finale of that is a series of essays, biographical and autobiographical essays about people who were in leadership in the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Alright, so that's what it is. Some of this was lists of callings. I skimmed through those pages instead of reading name of a specific person was sent as a missionary to a specific place. There was like a whole page, several times a whole page of lists. Overall, I'd recommend this book because it's interesting to see what people were saying back then, although I hope you wouldn't read it and be convinced about everything they said, because they were wrong about some things. It was free, if I'm remembering correctly. A lot of the old books from the 1800s, they're free on the internet, and as Nook books, they're free. One thing that bugged me that they kept doing in these writings was calling Joseph Smith III Joseph Smith Jr. Come on now, people. Joseph Smith III had a father, Joseph Smith. Guess what his grandpa was? Joseph Smith. That makes him the third. They should have, they shouldn't have done that, calling Joseph Smith III Joseph Smith Jr. Do they not realize that Joseph Smith Jr.'s dad was Joseph Smith? Joseph Smith was not an orphan with an unknown father. It bugs me. But, alright. Here are some basic facts about the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It officially started in 1860. They claim to be the correct succession or next thing after Joseph Smith Jr. So they might say they started in 1830 based on that, but Joseph Smith III being the leader of the people started in 1860. Although in these writings that I found, there was something about 1852 being mentioned. Joseph Smith III was the first leader of it. I didn't realize until I read these things he first turned it down, the idea of leading a church. It is the largest break-off from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, according to my knowledge. And I don't know, maybe the polygamists are a larger break-off, but they're definitely one of the big ones. They might call us a break-off from them. We can peacefully disagree about that one. They, in the 1800s, denied that Joseph Smith had engaged in polygamy and taught polygamy. They were very vehement about that. It's an obvious fact when you look at all the evidence. All those people who heard Joseph Smith were his wives, were at his weddings. The polygamy insiders of Nauvoo who survived the trek to Utah and wrote down and said to people who wrote down what they saw, heard, and knew. Joseph Smith definitely practiced polygamy. So I'm not sure how, what the official position of the church is now, or what the average member would say about that. The Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in my lifetime changed their name to the Community of Christ. I like the old name better. But I'm not going to use that new name they have for themselves anymore in this video, because this is a history book about when they called themselves the Reorganization, or the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So do we have any common ground? We do, but they are not Mormons. So it's inappropriate if you're talking about what Mormons believe. Well, there's ones here, they believe this, and then that other one, they believe that. No, Mormon means Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You don't get to suddenly throw everyone else into that group. We are an organized group. We went to Utah together back in the 1800s. And you don't get to say, hey, that one's a part of that group, when that group keeps track of who their members are. And so, we do have common ground in the Book of Mormon. I think they have the chapters and verses arranged differently. The original copy of the Book of Mormon on the gold plates did not have our modern system of verses and chapters. And so that aspect of the Book of Mormon is a modern interpretation, I guess, but it doesn't change the meaning if you, if you say, from here to here is one verse, and then somebody else comes along and says, no, these 4 things you're calling 4 verses, that should be 1 verse. It's still the same words in there. Doctrine and Covenants. They have a Doctrine and Covenants, we have a Doctrine and Covenants. And they are the same if you're talking about the sections of the Doctrine and Covenants that are of Joseph Smith, that they do not believe, from Joseph Smith Jr., that they do not believe are made up and a lie by Brigham Young, or things that they say we're not sure about. So basically the beginning, everything but the end of the Doctrine and Covenants is common ground. Some parts of our Doctrine and Covenants come from Brigham Young, Wilford Woodruff, Spencer W. Kimball. They do not believe in those parts being inspired. Whether we use the same Bible, we have the same Christian Bible, but like translation. You could say we don't, you could say we do. Here's specifically what I mean about that. In Joseph Smith's lifetime, he engaged in what we sometimes call the translation of the Bible. It was not a translation in the traditional sense of that word, where somebody spends time studying 2 languages. They know 2 languages. It's still the same sense of translation if somebody lives in a culture where they hear 2 languages. But they know 2 languages mentally. They know them. They take something into one language, they rewrite it to get the same meaning in the other language because of their knowledge. And that's not what the Joseph Smith translation is. That was Joseph Smith being used by God, or as his tool, or somebody who doesn't believe would say Joseph Smith claiming that God was inspiring him about what the Bible writers really meant, what they actually wrote, because there have been things cut out from the Bible over years and years of apostasy by people that didn't like something. There have been things that were not translated accurately because sometimes that could happen. Words have more than one meaning, and it's entirely plausible for a translator to force their opinion about something that they already had onto the thing they're translating. If you go to our website, order a paper Bible from us. We still do that, have paper printout Bibles and scriptures, all the scriptures. You will get a King James translation of the Bible with footnotes, where there's a difference between the King James translation and the Joseph Smith translation, also known as the Inspired Version. If you get a paper Bible from them, And I've fact-checked this because I went to the Kirtland Temple, which they own, and in the visitor center, flipped through one of their scriptures to see what it was like. Their Bible is 100% Joseph Smith translation, also known as inspired version. There's no, King James, New King James, NIV, ESV, with footnotes. It's straight up inspired version. In these writings, I found bad logic. Next section of my video. Bad logic, and here's that bad logic specifics. More than once, they claimed that the persecution, that persecution is a proof of punishment by God. Yes, though at that time, that was in the 1800s. Well, it was published in the 1900s, but some of these writings were from the 1800s. The 1800s was when the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was being severely persecuted. We got chased to Mexico. Utah was Mexico when we made the decision to run for our lives and move there. The army got sent after us based on lies. And then in the 1880s, church property was literally being taken and church leaders were being put in prison. So all that persecution, according to some of the writers of the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if you receive persecution, that proves you are in a state of apostasy and you're not inspired by God and you're not doing things right. If that is, well, that's bad logic because the devil inspires people against what's good. Christians have received persecution for all of Christianity. In the Old Testament times, we see that the prophets received persecution. Jezebel killed a lot of them. But if persecution means proof that you're wrong, they just disproved Joseph Smith Jr., the man they claimed to believe was a prophet, because he was persecuted to the point of martyrdom. So they just prove themselves wrong and everyone else wrong if they're right about that logic. They claim to be bigger than us at that time and growing faster than us at that time. And that proved that they were right. Okay, numbers don't prove who's right. I would hope that most people are, more people are right about something, but it is entirely possible and plausible for the majority to be wrong about something. The main difference or point of breaking off between the two of us, the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is who should be next after Joseph Smith Jr. to lead the church. According to the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it's got to be a descendant of Joseph Smith Jr. According to us, that's got nothing to do with it. When Joseph Smith Jr. was martyred, we had a quorum of 12 apostles. The apostles are the leaders of Jesus Christ Church. That's why Paul compares them to the foundation of a building, a metaphorical foundation of the church. So the leading apostle is the next leader of the church. I find the claim that a descendant of Joseph Smith must be the next leader of the people Joseph Smith was leading to be bad logic, untrue. That would make sense if it was a business, for-profit business, something like that. Or a kingdom where Joseph Smith was a king, but Christ is king. It's Jesus Christ's church, not Joseph Smith's church. So there's no need. It seems to me like they're claiming it to be Joseph Smith's church and not claiming it to be Jesus Christ's church if they're saying it has to be continually led by a direct descendant of Joseph Smith. Some new ideas or new things I don't remember hearing before I read this are, it called the period from 1844 to 1852 an apostasy. And wow, that's some really shocking terms. That's not like a vulgar accusation. I disagree with it, but it's not shocking like if it's a vulgar accusation. But to say apostasy, I strongly disagree. But here's some more bad logic. If that really was an apostasy, what happened the last time there was an apostasy to end the apostasy? Angels coming and bringing priesthood power back. Well, the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints does not claim that angels were bringing priesthood power back. But that's what ended the last apostasy before this one that they believe, or were claiming. The apostasy from approximately 180 to 1820 was ended by Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ visiting, by many angels sent by Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ, including angels bearing the priesthood. If there really was an apostasy from 1844 to 1852, there would need to be some restoration of the priesthood, wouldn't there? Alright, Joseph Smith III at first refused to lead the Reorganized Church. Let's see. I don't remember hearing before how they got possession of the Kirtland Temple. I think before I read these writings, I just assumed that, they had claimed that they always owned it, or that I'd assumed that they had bought it, maybe. Because that's one way to get a building you want, is to buy it. But apparently they used some legal maneuvering and got a court to claim the person who, at that time, was claiming possession and legal ownership of the temple did not legally have ownership of it, and force the owner to give it to the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That disheartened me a little bit. Why not just save up your money and buy the thing? Why not, request tithing? There are many stories of miracles. I don't remember hearing them, when I read this book, that's the most in-depth information I had about the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There were a lot of stories of miracles. As I was reading those miracles, I was debating with myself, do I believe them? Do I not believe them? I think those miracles really happened because God loves everyone, and God can make a miracle happen for people, even if they're not fully following Him or following His prophet, if they really have faith in God. They denounced the concept of tithing, the very biblical Book of Mormon Doctrine and Covenants concept of tithing. That was one of their complaints against Brigham Young and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at that time. I was shocked by that. I would have never guessed they would have denounced such a clearly biblical, Book of Mormon-ish, Doctrine and Covenancy thing. Other noteworthy things I noticed about these writings, noteworthy, or things I want to comment on. Hey, it's my video, so that does make it noteworthy. They acted surprised at the disgust that the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints had about them back then in the 1800s. They sicked the government on us. They were lying about whether Joseph Smith taught polygamy, and they were encouraging the government to take extreme and harsh measures against us for the crime, the quote crime unquote, of people having consensual marriage relationships. And some very severe punishments for those relationships. My opinion was excessively severe for those relationships. Yeah, when you're sending the army out after us to break us up, expect us to have a negative feeling about you. They were, they were claiming that, let's stick to the polygamy real quick when I got started on that. they use words like sedition or treason or synonyms of those to describe the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints engaging in polygamy back when it was us doing it. That's a really harsh term to describe just getting married to someone. You know, sedition and treason, that should be used if you're like claiming you've got a different president, if you're giving a foreign army information, if you're joining the foreign army, if you're attacking the government. We were not, you know, we weren't shooting up the marshals that were out in Utah. We were not claiming that James Buchanan or Abraham Lincoln or who were the other presidents back then. We weren't claiming they weren't our presidents. So there was no sedition. That's too harsh of a word to describe that. I wouldn't use the word sedition to describe like a drug dealer right now. They're evil and they're killing people literally because using recreational drugs the way the sellers tell you to literally kills you sometimes. Since they literally are killing people, maybe some harsh punishments are not excessive. But I wouldn't even call somebody like that committing treason and sedition and rebellion. They're just engaging in an immoral business. So some of these writings were of people who were trying to be missionaries to Utah to reclaim us. And they were writing as if they had more in common with the other Christians than with us, which I agree with. Yeah, they did. They weren't us. But they were claiming in some of these writings they were best equipped to come get us and straighten us out instead of the other Christians. Nah, everyone, they were all trying to talk us out of following Jesus Christ. The Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Baptists, the Methodists, the Presbyterians, they're all trying to talk us out of following Jesus Christ. But one of these missionaries that was in Utah trying to preach to us had some complaints, which I thought were irrational, unreasonable complaints. You sick the government on us. You're lying about whether Brigham Young was for or against education. Yeah, Brigham Young is not rolling over in his grave at having universities named after himself. Even if the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, in their writings in the 1800s, I don't know what one of them would say now about this, but in the writings in the 1800s, they were claiming Brigham Young was, so against education. He wasn't. They lied about whether we killed people for apostatizing. They lied about whether Joseph Smith taught polygamy. They were encouraging the government to come out to Utah and give cruel and unusual and excessive punishments for just marrying somebody. And so, yeah, you're going to get a cold shoulder from us. But he was claiming there was some harsh tyranny from the leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Utah because of those things. It's not harsh tyranny if you're trying to talk us into leaving Jesus Christ and we don't want to leave him. It's not harsh tyranny if you're encouraging the government to be excessive against us and we don't want to talk to you. It's not harsh tyranny if we have Jesus Christ, if we've found the Messiah, if we are on a straight and narrow and we don't want to hear you. That's not tyranny. That's just we don't want to hear you. I've been a missionary. I did not think the government where I was, or the Catholic and Baptist leaders were engaging in tyranny because people didn't want to talk to me. No, they were living their lives, using their freedom of religion to have their beliefs that they had. The people didn't want to hear me, and that's okay. That's their right. I was not the victim of Catholic tyranny when Catholics did not want to talk to me. I was not the victim of Jewish tyranny when a Jew did not want to talk to me. I'm confused about why polygamy has not been legalized yet and how some people speak so harshly against polygamy now. Not that now is the time for people to engage in polygamy. Those of you out there who are thinking about engaging in polygamy, I have one thing to say to you. It's not time for it. God's default setting is not polygamy. And how does God change his default settings? By revelations through his prophets. So don't engage in polygamy. Don't get your first, second wife lined up as if we're certain we're going to get polygamy back. Nope, I have no reason to believe, you have no reason to believe God's going to bring it back. So it would be a violation of don't practice polygamy if you're already getting second wife lined up. But I am for everybody's fundamental human rights. And I prefer laws to be rational. I prefer laws to not be arbitrary. I prefer laws that, if we're going to have a certain thing being the basis for laws, that we stick with that over everything. The Obergefell Supreme Anarchist ruling, or Supreme Court, ruling claims that you're violating people's fundamental human rights if you don't give them a marriage certificate for what they want and what they're attracted to. What they want and what they are attracted to and what they love. That's the criteria that Obergefell is saying. That's why Obergefell said we had to start giving these marriage certificates to the claimants in the case. Well, then we must, if those three things, you can say that about polygamy. A polygamist is attracted to what they are doing. They want what they are doing. So they're attracted to it. They want it. There are men out there who love two women. There are three women who all love each other. Three men who all love each other. There are women who want their man to have another woman. I don't think that's the right way to live, but that's if we're going to say we have to give out marriage licenses for those reasons, polygamy meets all those criteria. The reaction that we got in the 1800s when we were doing polygamy, I think it was excessively harsh, and it's just getting married. I don't see how it's reasonable or allowable for taking property worth over $50,000 from somebody who teaches what they believe God wants them to teach. I don't want NAMBLA to have their property taken. I want the NAMBLA members who actually engage in the thing they're encouraging to get the death penalty, because that is a reasonable punishment for what the Man-Boy Love Association wants to be legal. But as long as the individual people aren't doing it, that's their freedom of speech to say it's something. And their freedom of speech to, have property so they can get together and talk to each other about what they think should be legal. So that's my thoughts about the polygamy. It doesn't make sense to be so harsh to put people in prison over you just got married. And then after there were already relationships made and children made, it was a crime to keep in touch with them. That's ridiculous. Telling a father he cannot keep in touch with his kids, that's evil. Those anti-polygamy laws in the 1800s were evil because it was literally a crime for a father to keep in touch with his kids. How can you not be disturbed by those bad laws? And living together was proof of the crime of being married. So you can't help poor people now? Those anti-polygamy laws forced people to be out literally homeless. It made some people homeless. If a man had both wives living with him, to obey the anti-polygamy laws, he had to kick one wife out into the frozen snow in the hot desert. That's inhumane. That's a violation of fundamental human rights if people can't have a place to stay and be protected from the reason that people need to build houses. Heat, cold, wetness, sunburn. Yeah. Thank you for watching, and you have a good day.